Okay, guys, we're going to be speed running through physics past paper ones and seeing how many we can do in 1 hour. An object is removed from the ground and placed on a shelf. Which of the object's properties is expected to increase? We know that potential energy, change in potential energy is equal to mass times gravity multiplied by change in height. A student sets up a single pendulum and finds that the period is 1.7 seconds. To obtain a period nearer to 1 second, he should shorten the pendulum. Using a lighter bulb or a heavier bulb wouldn't affect it. And the formula for finding the time period is 2 pi square root of length over g. So a shorter length would give you a shorter period. How many significant figures is the quantity 25.92 meters cubed express? This is 4 significant figures. 3 immiscible liquids P, Q, R have densities which differ. Q is denser than P but less dense than R. Which of the following diagram shows how the liquids settle in a measuring cylinder? So Q is denser than P but less dense than R. PQR. Which of the following quantities has the same value as 6 microcoulombs? So we know that micro is 10 to the negative 6. So this would be 6 multiplied by 10 to the negative 6 coulombs. When standing on the moon, the mass of an astronaut is 70 kilograms, so the mass never changed. When he returns to Earth, his approximate weight will be the gravity on Earth is 10 newtons per kilogram. So if we multiply this by the 70, we get 700 newtons. Linear momentum is the product of mass and velocity. To measure the external diameter of a measuring cylinder, most accurate one should use a. So if we're measuring the external diameter of a measuring cylinder, it would use a pair of vernier calipers. The acceleration due to gravity is to be determined by measuring the time taken for a small steel ball to fall through a specific height. Which of the following activities is unnecessary? That would be finding the mass of the ball. We know that Galileo says that two objects, it doesn't depend on their mass, they'll fall at the same speed. When two bodies collide, momentum is conserved. This means that, the principle of movement states that total momentum before is equal to the total momentum after. So that's D. Which of the following changes can be caused by a force acting on a body? So when a force acts on a body, we know that it can change the motion, it can change the shape of it, but density is kind of tricky. For instance, if you had a bread, if you were to apply a force to it, you know that the volume would decrease and the density as a result would also be changed. So that would be D. Item 12 refers to the following diagram, which shows two vectors of magnitudes A and B, represented by OA, OB. The vector act at point O and are directed perpendicular to each other. Which of the following pairs represents both the magnitude and direction of the resultant vector? So the resultant vector would travel like this, and its action is for the magnitude and direction. So in order to find this, we know it's a right angle, so you can use Pythagoras theorem. So it would be A squared, B squared, and that would give you the resultant. So the resultant squared would equal to A squared plus B squared, but here the square root, and this is how they get from O to C, and A squared plus B squared all square rooted. So the answer is D. Which of the following features must be present in a stable, well-designed racing car? A fast racing car needs a low center of gravity, so it doesn't topple over at the fast speed that it travels at. Which of the following sources of energy are classified as renewable? Solar energy is renewable, wind energy, yes, geothermal energy, heat from the Earth's core, they're all renewable. A bubble of gas rises to the surface of a soft drink, so it rises to the surface of it. This is because the density of the gas is greater than the density of the drink. No, the upthrust on the bubble is greater than the weight of the bubble. Yes, so the upthrust, the force pushing it up, is greater than the force that's pushing it down. So it will therefore rise to the surface. Item 16 refers to the following diagram, which shows a dam. The pressure on the dam at the bottom of the reservoir depends on the only thing that affects pressure is height. So this is the formula for pressure. Pressure is equal to rho GH, which is density by gravity by height. So the depth of the water. What is the unit for the moment of a force? Moment is the product of the distance by the the perpendicular distance by the force. So that would be the force multiplied distance, Newton meters. When heating a substance, a point is reached where no further change in temperature is observed. The most likely reason for this is that um, the substance is changing state. When it's changing state, there's no change in temperature. Which scientist was responsible for arriving at the conclusion that measured amounts of electric and mechanical energy can be converted to proportionate amounts of heat energy? So anything with energy, we know that's joule. Which of the following temperature range is most suitable for a clinical thermometer? Clinical thermometers are used to measure temperatures of humans, so that would be 35 to 44 degrees Celsius. According to the pressure law states that pressure is directly proportional to temperature. Which of the following statements is true? Pressure is not constant. Volume is constant. There's no volume here. Which of the following statements about evaporation is false? Evaporation requires heat energy and causes cooling. That's true. During an evaporation, the faster molecules escape the liquid, yes, escapes from the surface. Only at the surface, yes. Evaporation occurs at room temperature. No, evaporation can occur at any temperature. The heat capacity of a substance is defined as the amount of heat energy needed to raise the temperature of the substance by 1 degree. If it said specific, it would be mass. Which of the following processes must most likely account for the fact that pot handles are usually made of wood or plastic? Conduction. Wood and plastic are not good conductors, therefore heat will not travel to them easily. The heat from a nearby fire reaches other places mainly by convection. Convection currents in the air will cause the air to be heated. If you're wondering why it's not radiation, radiation is heat that's traveled through electromagnetic waves in a straight line. A light bulb is filled with a gas at a temperature of 293 Kelvin. If the initial pressure of the gas is P, what will be the pressure B when the temperature increases to 360? So right here we'd have to use gas law. So with that original pressure P1 over the original temperature, Kelvin, is equal to pressure 2 over the new temperature. So in order to find what the pressure is, we'd have to multiply both sides here by the 360 Kelvin. And another way to write this, P1 over 293 multiplied by the 360. If we're just to replace the positions of these, they're being multiplied, so it's commutative. It doesn't really matter. So it'd be 360 over the 293 multiplied by P. Which of the following wave phenomenon play a role in the greenhouse effect? Greenhouse has to deal with heat, so it'll be infrared waves. Refers to the following diagram of a slinky. In using the slinky to demonstrate longitudinal waves moving from point A to point B, the spring is made to vibrate. Longitudinal waves, they vibrate parallel. Which of the following statements about waves is true? Longitudinal waves do not undergo refraction. Always undergo refraction. Always undergo reflection, refraction, and diffraction. That's correct. Which of the following statements about sound is not correct? Sound does travel more slowly than light. Sound does not travel through a vacuum. That's true. Sound is transmitted as a transverse wave. No, it's a longitudinal wave. Item 31 refers to the following graph with axes having the same scales of two sound waves, P and Q. Which of the following statements is true? Q is louder than P, but P has a higher pitch. Yes. Q has a larger amplitude, therefore the sound is louder, but P has a greater frequency. It has more waveform, therefore it has a higher pitch. Which of the following objects can detect X-rays? Photographic films can detect X-rays. It, it is comprised of compounds that give off a chemical reaction when an X-ray comes in contact with it. An object always viewed in a plane mirror. PQ. Which of the following diagrams correctly shows the formation of the image eye? So it would bounce off the mirror and then hit the eye. So this one is looking correct. No, this would have to be a straight line. Okay, and no, this is going the opposite direction. So the answer is A. Refers to the following diagram which shows a profile of a wave traveling across a water surface. Waterways are transverse waves. From the information given, the frequency is equal to 1 over time. We know this is in milliseconds, so frequency is equal to 1 over one wavelength. So 20 multiplied by 10 milliseconds is minus 3. And when you work that out, we get 50 hertz. The critical angle of glass is 42 degrees. Which of the following diagram correctly shows the path of a ray of light through a triangular glass prism? So it would enter the glass prism, it would refract, and then since it's greater than the critical angle, it would undergo total internal reflection. So that's what's occurring here. It's entering, refracting towards the normal, and undergoing total internal reflection where the angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection, sorry. Item 39 refers to the following graph. The amplitude of the wave on the graph above is represented by amplitude is the maximum displacement from the equilibrium point. So UW, yes. Item 40 refers to the following table which lists the refractive index of 4 different materials. In which material would the light waves have the slowest speed? As the refractive index increases, the speed of the waves will decrease. So diamond would have the slowest speed. A glass rod is rubbed with a piece of silk and is positively charged. The glass rod becomes charged so the glass rod would lose electrons and transfer it to the silk. So it would lose electrons and become positively charged. Item 42 refers to the following circuit diagram, which of the following options shows the name of the component correctly matched with a number. So this is a fuse, diode, resistor, and lamp. So the answer that looks like that: 3 diode, 1 lamp, 4 resistor, 2 fuse, D. Item 43 refers to the following diagram. Two light aluminum spheres AB are suspended by insulating threads. If they come to the rest as shown in the diagram, the force keeping them apart is... Okay, so I'm inferring here that they have the same charge and that's what's making them repel. So it'd be electrostatic. Okay. Item 44 refers to the following diagram which represents a straight wire carrying a current into the plane of the paper, so it's going into the paper. Which of the following diagrams best represents the magnetic field around the wire? So right here, you'd have to use your right hand grip rule, and when you point your thumb into the page, you'd see that your 4 other fingers are turning a clockwise motion. Item 44 refers to the following graphs which represents 2 alternating currents. Which of the following combinations correctly identifies the current with greater frequency? The more waves there are, the greater the frequency. So there's a greater frequency in I, but let's look at amplitude now. They all have the same maximum displacement away from the equilibrium point, so neither of them have a greater peak value, but one has the greater frequency. Item 46 refers to the following diagram, which shows a small negatively charged dust particle midway between 2 plates being observed with a microscope. Which of the following arrows correctly indicates the direction of movement of the dust particle when the switch S is closed? So if the switch S was closed, we know this is positive terminal, negative terminal. So positive would flow this way, and there would be a positive buildup of charge right here. Negative charge, electron flow, would cause a buildup right here. So the top would become negatively charged, and right here would become positively charged. And we know the dust particle is negative, so it moved down towards the positive. So down. The best material for the core of an electromagnet that would be iron. Iron is used in transformers because it's really suitable for electromagnetic fields. The SI unit of charge is coulombs. Item 49 refers to the following diagram of a simple AC generator. We know AC generators converts kinetic energy into electrical energy. The parts labeled X in the diagram are known as they're the slip rings. This is what turns. Which of the following sequences of events occur when an excessive current passes through a fuse? So you'll have a fuse, it has a thin wire in the center. The thin wire would get hot, it would melt, and then the current is cut off. A device which converts sound into electricity is called... So the microphone would convert your audio and it would send it through electronic signals to the computer. So a microphone. An ideal transformer has 1,200 turns on the primary and 600 turns in the secondary. If the voltage across the secondary is 20 volts, what's the voltage across the primary? So you know that it's a step-down transformer. The secondary coil has less turns than the primary, and the voltage would be reduced by twice the amount, so it'd be 40 volts. Which of the following combinations of ammeter characteristics is correct? So ammeters are connected in series because they have a low resistance. So low in series. Item 54 refers to the following circuit diagram of two resistors. What is the equivalent resistance of the two resistors? So we know these are connected in parallel, and in order to find resistance in parallel, it will be total resistance is equal to 1 over resistance 1 plus 1 over resistance 2, which is equal to 1 over 4 plus 1 over 2. And then once we do that, we'd get 3 over 4, and it's the reciprocal of this, which would give us 4 over 3, which is equivalent to 1.3 approximately. Madame Curie works in scientific research was chiefly concerned with radioactivity. She died as a result of it. In the scattering experiment conducted by Geiger and Martin, some of the alpha particles were deflected. They were deflected from the nucleus. The explanation for this phenomenon is that electrons have a small space. No. Electrons have a small charge. No. The nuclear charge and mass are concentrated. Yes. The nuclear charge here would cause it to deflect, and since it's concentrated, it would also cause it to deflect. Okay. Carbon 14 decays in accordance with the equation. You can't really see that. The emission of this looks like 6, and this is 7. And we know that an electron would cause this product. So this is a beta decay, so beta particle. Which of the following are possible symbols for an isotope of the nuclide AXZ? So the proton number would remain the same, and the proton number, which is the atomic number, would remain the same, and the mass number would change. Um, so the following are possible symbols for an isotope of the nuclide. Okay, we're gonna skip this question. I can't really see it. Okay, alpha particles, beta particles, and gamma rays from a radioactive source are subjected to a transverse magnetic field, which of them would not be deviated from the original path. We know that um, rays are only deviated when they have a charge, and gamma is the only one that doesn't have a charge. So it'd be 3 only. Beta has a negative charge, alpha has a positive charge. Okay, last question. The number of radioactive nuclei present in a sample at a time, which of the following graphs best represents the variation with time of the number n of the undecayed nuclei present? So we know our radioactivity graph is exponentially decreasing, so it'll be C. Okay, next past paper, May, June 2023. 3.14 expressed as two significant figures is, let's take off all of this, so 3.1. An example of a vector quantity has both magnitude and direction. We know displacement does that. Which of the following instruments is suitable for measuring the diameter of a human hair? That would be micrometer screw gauge. It is a precision measuring instrument. Item 4 refers to the following diagram, which shows two forces x and y applied onto an object. What should be the magnitude and direction of a third force which will cause the object to remain stationary? So if the object is remaining stationary, then the net forces has to equal to 0. So it would have to be x plus y going in the opposite direction, so to the left. Which of the following is a derived unit? A derived unit is a unit that has to be worked out based on other fundamental quantities, so that would be meters cubed, which is meters times meters times meters. A block is allowed to fall freely towards the ground. As it falls, the gravitational potential energy it would be converted into kinetic energy, because kinetic energy is energy based on motion. So as it moves, it will be converted. Item 7 refers to the following diagram, which shows a section of a thermometer. What is the reading shown on the thermometer? Okay, you have to pay very attention here. So it's 80, then 90, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it increases by 4 out of 5 from here. So 88. Which of the following is a unit of momentum? Momentum is the product of mass and velocity. So kilograms meters per second one. Yeah. The kinetic energy of a body of mass m and velocity v is given by, we know that kinetic energy is half mv squared. So mv squared over 2, which is the same thing. A body initially moving at a constant speed is brought to rest at a uniform rate. Which of the following speed time graphs indicate the body of... Okay, so it's at constant speed and then it brought to rest at a uniform rate. That'll be C. Constant brought to rest at uniform rate. A 4 kilogram mass is traveling with a constant speed of 5 meters per second. It is brought to rest in 2 seconds. The average force acting on the mass to bring it to rest is, so force equal to mass times acceleration. We have the speed, but we don't have the acceleration. So you can find the acceleration by finding the gradient at which it slows down by, which would be 5 over 2, which is equal to 2.5. So we sub that in. So F is equal to the 4 kilograms multiplied by the 2.5, and we get multiplied by 10 newtons. An ice cube sinks in liquid A but floats in liquid B. Which of the following statements is true of liquid A and liquid B? So the ice cube, the weight remains constant, but there's something that's affecting it. So liquid A will have a smaller upthrust than liquid B, as it's able to float in liquid B but not in liquid A. So the upthrust is less in liquid A than in liquid B. A bus with luggage loaded on top is more likely to tip over when rounding a corner than the same bus with the luggage. The reason for this is that the luggage, the luggage, it would raise the center of gravity, making the bus more unstable. Item 14 refers to the following graph of a light spring, which shows a simple extension. We know force is directly proportional to extension. Which of the following statements are true about the spring above? The elastic limit of the spring has been exceeded. Yes, it's exceeded right here. The spring obeyed Hooke's law over its entire extension. No, it is located right here. The force per unit extension in the elastic region was 7.5 newtons. So you have the total force and the total extension, and when we divide these two, we'll get 7.5. So this is also correct. So it's 1 and 3. Power is a measure of, we know power is the rate at which energy is transferred. So rate of change of energy, power equal energy over time. Two forces of 8 newtons and 10 newtons cannot give a resultant of 1 newton. There's no way those two forces can give a resultant of 1. Item 17 refers to the following diagram. X, Y, Z are 3 billiard balls of equal mass whose centers lie in a straight line. Y and Z are touching one another. X traveling with a velocity of 20 meters per second impinges on Y. Assuming that the spheres are perfectly elastic, the resultant motion after impact will be that. So you know that the momentum before is equal to the momentum after. So if one ball is traveling at a speed, when it collides, and not, if two balls are stationary, then the other ball that moves will have to have the same speed as the original ball. So XY will remain stationary while Z moves on with a velocity of 20 meters per second. What is the gain in gravitational potential energy of a body of weight 200 newtons as it rises from height 30 meters to a height of 35 meters above the Earth's surface? So potential energy equal to mass times gravity times height. We know that weight is basically the same thing as mass times gravity. So we have the weight as 200 and a change in height from 30 to 35 would be 5. So that would give us 1000 joules. Which of the following quantities remains unchanged with an increase in temperature? So, an increase in temperature is basically the increase in kinetic energy of the particles. So, the mass will remain the same. Mass is how much matter something is made up of, it never changes. The specific heat capacity of a substance is defined as the amount of thermal energy required to raise the temperature of unit mass of the substance by 1 Kelvin. Specific has to deal with mass. Specific latent heat of vaporization of water is 2.26 multiplied by 10 to the 6 joules to kilograms. When 0.01 kilograms of water is converted into steam, so we're moving from the liquid to steam, they're both at 100 degrees. You would need to absorb this energy in order to change. So 2.26, which is the vaporization multiplied by the mass. And this is the same thing as 10 multiplied, 10 to the negative 2. So when you multiply those, you get that it absorbs 2.26. A gas occupies 2 meters cubed at 27 degrees Celsius at a pressure of 1 atmosphere. At a pressure of 2 atmosphere, it occupies a volume of 1 meters cubed. What is the temperature at this new volume and pressure? So P1 over T1 equal to P2 V2 over T2. So atmosphere is 1 multiplied by the volume. And we have to keep it, I mean, we have to change it to kelvins, but let's see something. Pressure 2 and 1. Oh, so we know that they would give the same temperature as when it started out, and it started out at 27 degrees Celsius, so it will be 27 degrees Celsius. Which of the following methods is the most suitable means of heating a brass bulb in order to determine the specific heat capacity by the method of mixtures? So heat energy gain will be equal to heat energy lost. So this will result in heat loss, also heat loss. Placing it in a boiling water bath for 10 minutes, yes. According to kinetic theory, which is how particles move, when a gas in a closed container is heated, the pressure rises because, alright, so the pressure will rise. These particles with kinetic energy are bouncing against the walls of the container. So something that looks like that. The molecules move faster and hit the walls. Molten naphthalene at 100 degrees Celsius is allowed to cool down to room temperature. So it's a cooling graph. If naphthalene has a melting point of 80 degrees Celsius, which of the following graphs best represents the cooling curve? So it has a melting point here. That's when the liquid would turn into a solid. Okay, so there would be no change of temperature when it's at 80 degrees Celsius. So no change in temperature here. It's close to a straight line. In which of the following conduction the main method of energy transfer? Conduction is heat by adjacent particles. Heat transfer by adjacent particles. So food being cooked in a pot on an electric stove. Which of the following are reasons why a hot liquid placed in a double wall vacuum flask retains its heat for a long time? So the silver inner walls reduce the heat loss of radiation, yes. Silver will reflect the heat back inside, keeping it at the same temperature. The silver outer walls helps absorb heat from the surrounding. Silver doesn't absorb heat. Evacuate space between the double walls reduces the loss of heat by conduction, yes. So 1 and 3. A person coming out of the sea would feel cool because seawater evaporates from the skin. So when seawater is on the skin, evaporation would cause a cooling effect on your skin, and that's why you feel cold sometimes when you sweat. The kinetic theory of matter suggests that the molecules of a gas are they're far apart and moving at random. Their intermolecular bonds are extremely low. Item 30 refers to the following diagram, which shows water boiling at the top of a glass test tube while a piece of ice remains unmelted at the bottom. Which of the following statement provides reason for this occurrence? So, air itself is a bad conductor of heat and the water is a bad conductor of heat. So, heat wouldn't travel to the ice as quickly. So, water is a poor conductor of heat. Item 31 refers to the following diagram, which shows the instantaneous profile of a wave traveling across a water surface. So displacement and a position. From the information above, the frequency is there's no time, so it wouldn't be able to depict any frequency here, so it's unknown. The sharp edges of a shadow suggest that light always travels in a straight line because it's the shortest path from a point to another. An echo is quieter than the original sound that produced it. This shows that compared to the original sound, the echo has a lower amplitude, smaller amplitude. Amplitude has to deal with loudness. Item 34 refers to the following diagram, which shows two similar loudspeakers connected to the same audio frequency generator. The speakers are set up a few meters away from a path XY. At some points along XY, no sound is heard because sound waves are diffracted, not necessarily. Interference of the sound waves take place, so there will be destructive interference and the sound wave would cancel out. So a ray of light leaving an air enters a glass of refractive index 1.6. The angle of refraction is 27 degrees. What is the sign of the angle of incidence? So you know that refractive index, go to sine I over sine R. So if refractive index is 1.6, the angle of refraction would be 27. What is happening? 27. Would multiply both sides by sine 27. And then we'll get this. Which of the following waves travel only longitudinal? So sound waves are longitudinal, radio waves, no, they're transverse, water waves are transverse. So it's I only. Which of the following can produce a diminished virtual image of a real object? That's a lot of words. So real here is a distraction. Diminished virtual image. And that's a diverging lens. Looks something like this. Thinner at the center, thicker at the edges. Total internal reflection in glass occurs. The angle of incidence is 90 degrees. The critical angle is exceeded. A ray of light in air strikes a glass block at an angle of incidence of 0 degrees. On entering the glass block, the light will be undeviated. The angle of incidence is equal to 0 degrees, so the angle of refraction will be undeviated. Position of an image formed by a plane mirror depends on the distance of the observer, no, distance of the object from the mirror. So we know the distance of the object is equal to the distance of the image away from the mirror. Which of the following expressions would represent the formula for linear magnification? We know it's always image over object. So anything that has an object over image is wrong. So it's height of image over height of object. So it's I only. Item 42 refers to the following graph showing the variations of alternating current with time. The value of current I1, T1 is called that's the peak value where the current is the highest. When a polythene rod is rubbed with a cloth, it becomes, so you know that polythene, it has a tendency to gain electrons. It's lower on the electrostatic series than cloth is. So it'll become negatively charged by gaining electrons. Which of the following diagram shows the magnetic field formed between a bar magnet and a piece of iron? So you know that when the bar magnet is brought to iron, it will cause iron to be temporarily magnetized, and iron would become a magnet itself. And you know, north always travels to south, so we'd have C as the correct answer. North, south. Item 45 reverse the following circuits where the ammeter reads 0.4 amps and the voltmeter reads 0.6 amps. The resistance R. Okay, so you know, using Ohm's law, V is equal to IR. The voltage 0.6 volts. Volts is equal to I, which is, 0.4 multiplied by R. So divide both sides by 0.4 and we get 1.5 ohms. A conductor rotating in a uniform magnetic field induces maximum instantaneous current when the conductor cuts the magnetic field lines at. Okay, so there's a maximum instantaneous current when it's perpendicular, and that's when it's 90 degrees. Which of the following relationships is correct for the combined resistance? R1 of resistors R1, R2, R3 connected in parallel. Okay, so when they're connected in parallel, we know it's the inverse. So 1 over R total is equal to 1 over all the resistance. A voltmeter has a very high resistance so that it can be placed in. Voltmeters are placed in parallel because they have a high resistance. So you top circuit. So that can place in parallel. So I can parallel with a component and not affect the circuit, yes. Which of the following graphs illustrates an alternating current? Current travels in both directions with time, so that would be D. Which of the following circuit arrangement is best suited for measuring a lamp's voltage? So this is not a lamp. Yes, we're finding the voltage across the lamp here, so it's C. Which of the following circuit diagrams best represents a series arrangement? No, this is parallel. Current will split. Yes, this is series. Current will only travel in one direction. Parallel and parallel. So the answer is B. Item 52 refers to the following diagram. What is the output of C and D when an input of 0, 0 is made at A and B? So if we know it's 0 and 0, unless it's a NOT gate or something, we know we'd get also 0, 0 output. It refers to the following circuit diagram. Using information given in the circuit diagram, which pair of values I1 and I2 is correct? So you know, current flows where there's more current flows where there's least resistance. So, and also the current going into these two junctions is split and has to equate to 6 amps. So you know, the current coming out is also 6 amps. So 1 plus 5, this gives us 6, but current flows where there's least resistance. So More current would flow in I1 than in I2. Just look at these options. More current flows in I1 at 4 to 2. Which of the following materials is most suitable for the core of an electromagnet? That would be soft iron. We know in transformers they use a soft iron core. According to the Rutherford Bohr model of a neutral stable atom, if protons, which has a positive charge, is equal to electrons with a negative charge, so proton equal electrons. Which of the following symbols would be possible for an isotope of a nuclide represented by AZX? Okay, I think this is the question above. It's just showing better. So an isotope of this would have the same number of protons but a different mass number. So it would be D. Which of the following cannot be deflected by a magnetic field? Since gamma rays have no charge, it's not deflected by a magnetic field. Which of the following hold on. Okay. Which of the following pairs of statements is true for both iron and steel? So iron is a temporary magnet where steel is a permanent magnet. It's easily magnetized. Retain this magnetism. Yes. B. Which of the following scientists discovered radium? Marie Curie discovered radium. Which of the following equations is correct? If it was at beta, there'd be no reduction in mass. Beta would have a no reduction in mass. Alpha is a positive helium nuclei that charge at plus 2. So it loses a mass number of 4 and it loses 2 protons as well. So it would have to be C. Okay, next paper. Okay, now we're on May, June 2022. Item 1 refers to the following measuring cylinder, which is used to determine the volume of a liquid. The volume of the liquid is, so you measure at the bottom of the meniscus, this is approximately 7.5 centimeters cubed. Given that force is equal to mass times acceleration, kilograms multiplied by meters per second, the unit of a force could be written as kilograms, acceleration meters per second squared. So kilogram meters per second squared. Okay. Item 3 refers to the following diagram, which shows two forces x and y applied onto the object. What should be the magnitude and direction of a third force, which is called the object to remain stationary? These are repeat, so it'll be x to y to the left. A diving ball is to be used at great depths, and so its walls are made thick. The main reason for that is pressure increases with depth. That's why the walls have to be thick. Item 5 refers to the following diagram, which shows a velocity time graph for a moving object. Which of the following statements about the object are true? So right here we can see it's moving at a constant velocity. It starts to decelerate here. Constant velocity again, accelerate, and a constant velocity. Which of the following statements about the object are true? It returns to its starting point. We cannot infer from a velocity time graph that it returns to its starting point. It has a zero acceleration between t2 and t3. Yes, it's at constant velocity, no acceleration. Its velocity at t4 is the same as its initial velocity. Yes, that's true. So it'd be 2 and 3. The unit for momentum, we know that momentum is equal to the mass times velocity. So it'd be kilograms meters per second. A 4 kilogram mass is traveling with a constant speed of 5 meters per second. It is brought to rest 2 seconds. The average force acting on it to bring it to its rest, this I repeat, that will be 10 newtons. Item A refers to the following diagram, which shows a non-uniform bar pivoted at P. W indicates the weight of the bar, and forces F1 and F2 are applied to the positions as shown. The sum of the clockwise moments about P. So clockwise moments move in this direction. So clockwise movements moving about P. So F1 would move in that direction towards P. F2, and so would F1. So I remember moments is the product of the force and a perpendicular distance. So it's F1 multiplied by D2 and F1 multiplied by D1. So it's the sum of those two. So it's D. Item 9 refers to the following diagrams of 4 vessels, each filled with water. The pressure due to the water is greatest at pressure is greatest where the depth is the greatest. So it's at Q. A piece of string is tied onto a small stone and then the stone is totally immersed in water. The tension in the string will, so we know that water will provide upward force called upthrust. So the tension of the string would be less than the weight of the stone. Which of the following properties remains unchanged as substance with an increase in temperature and mass? That's another repeat. When a ball is thrown vertically upwards and reaches its maximum height, when it's at its maximum height, it has maximum potential energy and minimum kinetic energy. The time period of a simple pendulum oscillating with a small amplitude depend on the length of the pendulum. Item 14 refers to the following diagram, which shows a simple extension against force. We saw this already based on the graph above. Which of the following statements should be true? Yes, it was exceeded. Spring obeys hook law. No. The force per, yes. So it's 1 and 3. Which of the following is an SI base unit? We know ampere is one of the 7 base SI units. Which of the following implements are designed to take advantage of a large moment provided by a relatively small force? So that a crowbar does that well, and so does a claw hammer. But a pair of tweezers does not. So it's 1 and 2. There are no attractive forces between the molecules in a gas. The intermolecular forces or the bonds are very weak. Which of the following statements about the pressure laws are true? Pressure directly proportional to temperature. The ratio of pressure, which is the same thing as this formula, is constant. Yes, it is. Volume is constant. Yes, it is. Pressure is not constant. So it's 1 and 2. Which of the following ranges of temperature is most suitable for a clinical thermometer? Clinical thermometer is used to measure temperature of humans, so 35 to 44. The specific heat of vaporization of water is the energy required to change 1 kilogram of water at 100 degrees Celsius to steam. Yeah, wait, yeah. The energy required to change the state of a substance was determined to be EH. If the mass of the substance is double the value of EH, it will also double. Energy is equal to MLF. So if the mass doubles, then the energy would also have to be doubled. So it's be doubled. A metal of mass M requires energy to raise its temperature from T1 to T2. The specific heat capacity of the metal will be given as, we know that energy supplied is equal to mass, the specific heat capacity by the change in temperature. So if we're finding specific heat capacity, we have to divide on both sides and then get EH over M T2 T1. Which of the following materials is both a good absorber and a good emitter? Good absorbers are good emitters, anything that's black, dull, or rough. So paint it black. The specific latent heat of vaporization of water is 2.26 when that this is a repeat question, so absorbs. Which of the following diagrams best illustrates convection currents in a liquid? Convection currents are from the bottom of the liquid to the top. Just like this. Hot air rises, cool air falls. Okay, item 26 refers to the following diagram, which shows water boiling at the top of a glass test tube while a piece of ice remains unmelted. This is also a repeat. Which of the following statement provides the reason for this occurrence? The water is a good conductor of heat. No, it's not. It's that the water is a poor conductor of heat. Two types of radiation L and R fall on a woman's left and right hands respectively. Her left hand feels hot but does not become tanned. Her right hand does not feel hot but eventually gets tanned. So the right hand is tanned, the left hand gets hot. The left hand would get hot from infrared and the right hand would get tanned from ultraviolet rays. So that's D. A student carries out an experiment to determine the specific heat capacity C of a solid using the electrical method. Which of the following equations should be used? So using the electrical method, energy supplied is equal to I VT, current times voltage times time, and that means current times voltage times time will also equal to the mass, the specific heat capacity, by the change in temperature. So divide both sides by the mass and the change in temperature, and we would get the specific heat capacity alone as this. So it would be IVT over M change in temperature. Item 29 refers to the following diagram, which shows a transverse wave at a particular instant. The wavelength of the wave is equal to the distance wavelength to successive thrusts or crests. So here the crest R is from P to S, so P to S. Which of the following equation expresses the correct relationship between the wavelength, speed, frequency? So you know that the speed is equal to the frequency multiplied by the wavelength. So anything that looks like that, um, so yes, when you divide by the wavelength, we get that F is equal to V over the wavelength. Item 31 refers to the following diagram, which shows an object in front of a plane mirror. Which of the following options best represents the image produced by the plane mirror? So know that it'll be the same distance away from the mirror, it'll be upright, laterally inverted, and the same size. So it looks something like this. So it's a B. Item 32 refers to the following diagram, which shows a longitudinal wave where C and R represent compressions and refraction respectively. If the lambda, which is wavelength, is equal to the distance between C1, the distance between C1 and R2 is, so this is one wavelength, and then this would be another wavelength, and half of that, so it's 1.5 wavelengths. Which of the following diagrams illustrates the law of reflection? The angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. So A. Which of the following properties is true of both light waves and sound waves? They undergo refraction. All waves undergo refraction. Item 35 refers to the following diagram, which illustrates a side view of a water wave, transverse wave. The amplitude of the wave is the maximum displacement away from the equilibrium point, so that would be 4. The refractive index of a transparent medium with a critical angle C for light traveling from the medium to air is, we know that the refractive index is equal to 1 over sine C, and 1 is equivalent to sine 90, so that would be C. Item 37. An explosion causes the emission of flowing types of waves. Which of these will be received first by a person some distances away from the source? So you know that light and infrared waves have the same speed, so it'll hit the person at the same time. Sound waves, however, they won't have the same speed, so it's 1 and 3. The note from a drum is louder, so you know that's due with amplitude when it's struck harder because the sound waves produced have a greater amplitude. Item 39 refers to the following diagram, which line lies along the principal axis of the converging lens. That would be JK. Rectification can best be done by using a diode. Rectification turns AC current into DC current. Item 41 refers to the following diagram, which shows an electrical circuit with a cell and two filament bulbs. Which of the following circuits is electrically the same as the circuit above? So this is series. So we're finding something that's in series, and C would be in series. All the others are parallel. Given the following truth table with inputs A and B and output C, which logic gate does this describe? Okay, so 0, 0 gives you 1. That means it's giving you the opposite of an AND gate, and the opposite of an AND gate is a NAND. Item 43. Which of the following equations cannot be used to determine the power dissipated in a resistor? That is R over V squared. These are correct. Yeah. Magnetic induction occurs when no iron nails near a magnet become magnetized. Yes. Which of the following circuit symbols represent a fuse? This one represents the fuse. Which of the following current time graphs best represents DC current? Stays in one direction, so it's A. Which of the following materials is most suitable for the coil of an electromagnet? That would be a soft iron. It's used in transformers. An ammeter has a very low resistance so that it can be connected in series and not affect the circuit. An ideal transformer has a primary to secondary ratio, turns ratio of 1 to 3. That means a step-up transformer. An alternating potential difference of 200 volts is applied to the primary coil. So the primary coil would induce a voltage of 200 volts, and the secondary coil would have a voltage that's 3 times that, so 600 volts. What is the current in the secondary circuit? So now there's a resistance of 200, so using Ohm's law, V is equal to IR. So 600 volts is equal to the current that we're trying to find multiplied by the 200 resistance. Divide both sides by 200 and you'll get 3 amps. What of the following symbols represents an AND gate? This one. What is the current through R1 if the current through R2 is 1.8 amps? So we're gonna find the voltage because you know that in parallel the voltages are the same. So voltage is equal to IR, which is equal to 1.8 multiplied by the 4, and this would give you 7.2 volts. So we're going to apply that voltage to this resistor. So using the same Ohm's law formula, 7.2 volts is equal to the current that we're trying to find multiplied by the resistance, divide both sides by 6, and we should get um, 1.2 amps. Current flows in the path of least resistance. Which device allows one circuit to switch another circuit on and off without any direct contact between them? That would be a magnetic relay. A magnetic relay is able to cause a circuit with something like a switch. It would cause this thing right here to kind of bend because of the magnetic force, and then it would cause the circuit to be on. Okay. Item 53 refers to the following diagram. Appropriate labels for devices W and input X are. So there's more turns in the primary coil than the secondary coil. That means a step up. So a step up, and we all know that it's an AC input. So step up transformer, AC input. Which of the following describes two properties of an alpha particle? Alpha particles are positively charged and are not very penetrating. Half-life is defined as the time it takes half of the radioactive atoms in a sample to decay. Yes, that looks right. Time it takes the radioactive atom. No. Okay, answer is A. Time it takes half of the radioactive atoms in a sample to decay. Yeah. Item 56 refers to the following information. The activity of a radioactive substance was measured at suitable intervals over a period of days, and its radioactive decay curve plotted as shown below. The half-life of the radioactive substance is approximately, so let's find one half-life. That's approximately 2. Let's do another one to be sure. That's approximately 4. So it's 2 days average. So 2 days. The nuclide contains, this is the proton number, it will contain 90 protons, and the mass number is contained of protons and neutrons. So in order to find the number of neutrons, we just subtract the number of protons from the mass number, which is 234 minus 90, and we'll get 144. Yeah. Yeah. Which of the following statements about radioactive decay are correct? It is dependent on conditions external to the nucleus? No. It's a random and spontaneous process. It is due to changes in the nuclei of the atom? Yes. It emits this energy in the form of radiation in order to become more stable. So it's 2 and 3. Which of the following statements about a proton is not true? It's a hydrogen atom minus an electron. It's true. It has the same mass as that of an electron. No, an electron has no mass. An isotope of uranium changes to, this is an example of, okay, so this is alpha decay. So you lose a mass number. It will lose a mass number of 4 and an atomic number of 2, because alpha particles are positively charged helium nucleus. Yes. Okay, now we're on to May, June 2021. Power can be defined as, power equal to energy or time, or work done over time. So C, errors due to parallax error can be minimized by placing the eye at a right angle. We're measuring at eye level. Which of the following pairs consists of fundamental quantities? Immediate weight is wrong. Weight is equal to mass times gravity. So it's our derived quantity. Mass and length, yes. Kg and meters. Time and current, yes. So it'll be 2 and 3. Item 4 refers to the following diagram, which shows two forces, x and y, applied onto an object. What should be the magnitude and direction of a third force, which would cause the object to... This is a repeat question, so it'll be x plus y to the left. Item 5 refers to the following diagram, which shows three forces of a magnitude L, M, and N, all same plane applied on a ring. Which of the following equation must be true in order for the ring to remain stationary? So the net forces must be equal to 0 if it wants to remain stationary. So this force N would have to equal to the resultant force here, and you can find that resultant force using Pythagoras theorem. Oh, let me draw that. It'll be like this, yeah. Okay, so in order to find R, that would be m squared plus L squared. So stationary, that means L squared plus m squared would have to equal to n squared. So n squared would have to equal to R squared. Okay. Which of the following changes can be caused by a force acting on a body? It's the same repeat question, it's all of them. Shape, motion, and density. First, the following diagram which shows two different size containers P and Q with waters at different levels connected by a gas tube and controlled by a tap. Okay, so water will stop flowing from P to Q when the heights are the same, because when the heights are the same, the pressure will be same. We know that pressure is equal to rho GH, rho being density. So when the water levels are equal, water levels, yes. Item A refers to the following graph of a light spring, which shows a simple extension versus force. This is also a repeat. So the elastic limit has been exceeded, yes. The spring obeyed Hooke's law, no. The force, yes. So it's 1 and 3. The kinetic energy of a body of mass m and velocity v is given by, this is also a repeat, half mv squared or mv squared over 2. Which of the following will be constant if a constant net force is applied to a body? So force is equal to mass times acceleration. If there's a constant force, there'll be a constant acceleration. Acceleration will be constant. Pressure in a liquid can be calculated using the formula pGh, which of the following sets of units will result in the SI unit of pressure. An ice cube sinks in liquid A but floats in liquid B. Which of the following statements? Oh, sorry. Pressure in a liquid can be calculated using the formula pGh, which of the following sets of units will result in the SI unit of pressure. So density, the SI unit of that is kilograms over meters cubed. Gravity is newtons over kilograms. So this correct. But this is wrong, so it's B. And then the height would be meters. An ice cube sinks in liquid A but floats in liquid B. Which of the following statements is true of liquid A and B? This is also a repeat question. The upthrust is less in liquid A than in B. Item 13 refers to the following diagram which shows a dam. This is a repeat question. Although the pressure on the dam at the bottom of the reservoir depends on the depth. It mainly depends on the depth. Which of the following is a SI base unit? Repeat question. Item 15 refers to the following graph which shows how the displacement of a runner from a starting line varies with time. From the graph, it can be deduced that the runner is going at a steady speed. He isn't going faster and faster because the gradient, which would be velocity, is constant. The gradient is constant at all points, so it's going at a steady speed. Two forces of 8 Newton and 10 Newton cannot give a result at force of 1 Newton. A piece of string is tied onto a small stone, and then the small stone is suspended, totally immersed in water. Tension in the string will be, since there's an upthrust in the water, this question was also a repeat. It would be less than the weight of the stone. The tension on the string would be less than the weight. Yeah. Okay. What is the gain in gravitational potential energy of a body of weight 200 newtons? This is also a repeat question. We got 1000 joules. Who was responsible for arriving at the conclusion that measured amounts of electrical and mechanical energy can be converted to proportional amounts of heat energy? Repeat question. Energy, joule. A metal of mass m requires energy to raise its temperature from T1 to T2. The specific heat capacity of metal will be given as, this is also a repeat question. It's EM. The specific heat latent the specific latent heat of vaporization of water is 2.26 multiplied by 10 to the 6 joules kilogram. When 0.01 kilograms of water is converted into steam, you have to absorb it. Repeat question. A gas occupies, this is also a repeat question. Which of the following statements about evaporation is false? Evaporation occurs only at the surface, that's true. Evaporation requires heat energy, causes cooling, that's true. In evaporation, faster molecules accept the liquid, true. Evaporation occurs at room temperature only, occurs at any temperature. Which of the following is the poorest conductor of thermal energy? Air. All of these are good conductors. So molten nullified. Okay, this is also a repeat question. So the melting point, the point at which is changing state and there have been no change in temperature. So you see that right here. So we see an electrical kettle of water is plugged into the mains. The major process by which heat travels through the water is convection. Hot air will rise, cool air will fall. These are convection currents. It happens mainly in air or liquids. Which of the following are reasons why a hot liquid placed in a double wall vacuum flask retains its heat for a long time? Evacuated space between the double walls reduces the loss by conduction, yes. Silver inner walls reduce the loss of heat by radiation. Yes, the silver outer walls absorb. No, that's wrong. So it's one and two only. As the temperature of a liquid rises, so temperature is the kinetic energy of particles. So as the temperature increases, the kinetic energy of the molecules will also increase. A light bulb, this is a repeat question. So it would be 360 over 293. Uh, yes. Item 30 refers to the following diagram which shows water boiling at the top of a glass test tube while a piece of ash remains unmelted. This is also a repeat. Which of the following statements explains the reason for this occurrence? Water is a poor conductor of heat. Which of the following diagrams illustrates the law of reflection? Angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. The human ear is incapable of hearing a silent dog whistle because the frequency of the wave are out of range from human hearing. Humans can only hear from 20 to 20 thousand hertz. And echo is quieter than the original sound that it produced. This shows that compared to the original sound, the echo has a smaller amplitude. Amplitude has to do with sound. First, the following diagram, which shows a longitudinal wave where C and R represent the compressions and the rarefactions respectively. If the wavelength, the distance between C and R2, to repeat question again, it's 1.5. A ray of light leaving air enters a glass of refractive index 1.6. The angle of refraction is 27. What is the sine of the angle of incidence? So angle of the refractive index is equal to sine of the angle of incidence over sine of the angle of refraction. So if we multiply both sides by the angle of refraction, get the angle of incidence alone. And it tells us the angle of refraction is 1.6 and the refraction is 2.7. Right. Which of the following diagrams best represents the wave generated in a ripple tank by a small spherical dipper vibrating at a constant frequency? So if it's a constant frequency, then the waves will look identical. So it's A. These ones, it varies. So which of the following statements about waves is true? Only transverse waves undergo reflection? No, always do. Can only take place within light waves? No, all waves undergo. Yes. Which of the following objects can detect X-rays? Photographic film. A ray of light in air strikes a glass block at an angle of incidence of 0 degrees. The light will be undeviated. The position of an image formed by a plane mirror depends on the distance of the object from the mirror. See how we're just getting repeat questions? The refractive index of a transparent medium, the critical angle C for light traveling from the medium to air is n is equal to 1 over sine C. 1 is the same thing as sine 90. The refractive index of the transparent material. Let's see. Which of the following diagrams is a graphical representation of current versus potential difference for a metallic conductor at a constant temperature? So we know that this conductor is an ohmic conductor. So it'll be directly proportional and linear. So the yeah. So current versus potential difference. Current would be on the y-axis. Potential difference would be on the x. Which, sorry. When a polythene rod is rubbed with cloth, it becomes, polythene has a tendency to gain electrons, so it become negatively charged by gaining electrons. Which of the following relationships between electrical quantities is correct? No, or no. Yes, the charge is equal to the amps per seconds. Refers to the following current circuit where the ammeter is 0.4 and the voltmeter is 0.6. What's the resistance of R? We know V is equal to IR. It will be 1.5. This is a repeat question as well. Item 46 refers to the following diagram. This is also a repeat. Two light aluminum spheres. This is where they are at rest. It will be electrostatic. Which of the following currents I, T graphs best represents DC current? Current flows in one direction at a time. So that's A. Item 40 refers to the following diagram. Appropriate labels for W and X are. There's more turns in the secondary coil, so it's a step up, and we know that the input always has to be AC. Rectification is best done by using a diode to turn AC into DC current. Item 50 refers to the following diagram of a simple AC generator. The parts labeled X in the diagram are known as the X. These are known as slip rings. It converts kinetic energy into electrical energy. Which of the following circuit diagrams best represents a series arrangement? That would be B. Item 52 refers to the following diagram, which represents a straight wire carrying a current into the plane of paper. Which of the following diagrams best represent the magnetic field around the wire? I have to use right hand grip rule, and we'll get that it goes in a clockwise direction. Which of the following symbols represents the AND gate? B. Which of the following materials is most suitable for the core of an electromagnet? Soft iron, which is used in transformers. Item 55 refers to the following diagram of a portion of the periodic table. In the diagram above, element F has 9 protons. How many protons does element B have? So they're counting it based on their atomic number. So 8, 7, 6, 5. And we know that helium has an atomic number of 4. So B would have 5 protons. The number of neutrons present in the nucleus of the nuclide is, mass number is equal to protons plus the neutrons, and the protons is 86. So 222 minus the proton number give us how many neutrons there are, and that is 136. Which of the following cannot be deflected by a magnetic field? Gamma rays, they have no charge. Sodium 24 decays into magnesium 24 with the emission of a beta particle. Beta particles are fast moving electrons with a negative charge. Each of the following options should be placed in the box to complete the equation. That would be: which of the following scientists discovered radium? Mercury. A radioactive isotope has a half-life of 20 days. How many days will it take for a given sample to have its activity reduced to 1/8 of its initial value? So a half, starting from the original mass number, multiplied by another half and another half. This would give us the 1/8, so there have to be 3 half-lives. One here, one here, one here. So 20 multiplied by 3 would give us 60 days. So answer is 60. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching.